Cleopatra emerging from the carpet before Julius Caesar. A realistic oil painting in the classical 19th century style of Reginald Arthur's The Death of Cleopatra, showing young Cleopatra VII unfurling gracefully from a rolled carpet in a grand Alexandrian palace room. Her lithe figure in a semi-transparent golden gown that subtly accentuates her allure and poise as she gazes seductively at an astonished Julius Caesar standing nearby. Warm vintage colors, browns, oranges, yellows with flickering torchlight. Soft, expressive brushstrokes, capturing the intimate tension and emotional intrigue. Painterly texture. Style of 1960s illustrations mixed with expressionist realism. Cinematic lighting, highlighting her jewelry and the curve of her form without explicitness. Subjects close to the foreground for dramatic closeness. Ancient, historical atmosphere evoking power and seduction. Cleopatra's lavish meeting with Mark Antony on the barge. A realistic oil painting in the classical 19th century style of Reginald Arthur's The Death of Cleopatra, portraying Cleopatra VII, lounging elegantly on her gilded barge, adorned with purple sails, dressed in a flowing Isis-inspired robe with translucent layers that hint at her sensual grace. As Mark Antony approaches with captivated eyes during their first encounter in Tarsus. Warm vintage colors, browns, oranges, yellows, reflecting sunset on the water, soft, expressive brushstrokes, conveying passionate chemistry and emotional depth. Painterly texture. Style of 1960s illustrations blended with expressionist realism. Cinematic lighting, casting warm glows on her skin and ornaments. Subjects positioned intimately close to the viewer. Historical and ancient vibe of romance and alliance. Cleopatra and Mark Antony in despair after the Battle of Actium. A realistic oil painting in the classical 19th century style of Reginald Arthur's The Death of Cleopatra, depicting Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony in a tense embrace within a shadowed Egyptian tent post-Battle of Actium, her diaphanous gown slipping slightly to evoke vulnerable allure as she comforts the wounded Antony, their expressions filled with defiant passion and sorrow. Warm vintage colors, browns, oranges, yellows, with dim war-torn ambience. Soft, expressive brushstrokes capturing emotional turmoil and subtle sensuality. Painterly texture, style of 1960s illustrations with expressionist realism. Cinematic lighting emphasizing their close forms and dramatic shadows. Figures foregrounded for intimate screen presence. Ancient, historical scene of war and love. Cleopatra's final act with the asp. A realistic oil painting in the classical 19th century style of Reginald Arthur's The Death of Cleopatra, illustrating Cleopatra VII reclining on her deathbed in a opulent mausoleum, her ethereal white gown draped sheerly over her body with artistic elegance as she presses the asp to her breast in a pose of ecstatic surrender. Her maids Iris and Charmian nearby in devoted collapse. Warm, vintage colors, browns, oranges, yellows, evoking a hazy, emotional twilight. Soft, expressive brushstrokes. Painterly texture, full of depth and innuendo through fabric flow. Style of 1960s illustrations and expressionist realism. Cinematic lighting with golden rays on her crown and skin. Subjects intimately close to the frame. Historical ancient atmosphere of ultimate power and destiny.